This is Game On, discussing the biggest games and all the latest sports news with Johnny Montalbano and Hank and Dichter on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
It's showtime, folks. It's episode 34 of Game On here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. I'm Johnny Montalbano. That's Hank and Dichter. Hank, good to see you. How you doing?
I am really pissed off about a certain blue hockey team that probably will be responsible for my hair being gray. I mean, look at this. How am I still full brown? Explain this. Despite the fact that I'm a Yankee, Giants / Rangers / Yankee fan, or at least Yankee fan, a millennial Yankee fan, if you know what I'm talking about.
Sure. So, folks, we will just put this out at the start of the show. We are going to be on Hank Rant Alert, and that'll come up later on in the show. But it is good to see you, Hank, and hopefully you did have a great Thanksgiving, and hope everybody did at home. And it's good to be back. It's been a few weeks since I've been here. Obviously, sometimes real life does get in the way, and that's what happened. But I want to thank Nick Morganson for filling in for me 2 weeks ago. And it's good to be back after the Thanksgiving holiday. And, we get back rolling here. The full week of Game On content. Of course, we have episode 34 airing now. We will have our Monty moment on what is just a crazy college football world right now. That'll come up later on in the week on Thursday. And, of course, our NFL picks against the spread on Friday. And of course, we want to hear from you folks as well. So please follow us on our social media accounts. You can follow us, our show accounts on Facebook and Twitter at Game On ETB. Our Instagram account is at Game On _ETB. And our personal handles there on the bottom of your screen, scrolling right there. And of course, our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ETB network. Subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know when all of our content is going to be coming out. And Hank, we come on with another jam-packed show. We've got a lot of NFL football, which we're going to get to in just a moment. We'll look back at the Thanksgiving Day games, all of Week 12, look ahead to Week 13. There's a lot of storylines with the NFL that we're going to get to as well. We've got the U.S. in the World Cup, which we're going to get to. They're actually playing as we are recording right now, and we will give you an update on that. We've got some baseball notes, and yes, we do have some hockey talk to get into. Obviously, Hank brought it up with the Rangers. Also, the Devils had a 13-game winning streak snapped at the hands of the Maple Leafs, and the reason why we're going to bring that up is what had happened in that game, and so we're going to get to that. So again, a lot to get to, but Hank, let's kick things off, obviously, with the NFL and go over what was just a wild Week 12 in the league. Really, all started on Thanksgiving Day with 3 pretty good games when you look at it. And the Bills able to get past the Lions 28-25 in a game that looked that the Lions definitely had a chance to win. But at the end of the day, Hank, the Bills just, once again, it was the second time in less than a week that they had played in Detroit's Ford Field. And yes, they are able to get the win. At the same time, though, kind of a costly win with Von Miller. But you look at that, and then we'll obviously get to our Giants in just a second. But just starting at the top there with the Bills and the Lions, what do you take away from that?
I thought that was definitely another good comeback win. I mean, look, it was an ugly win for the Buffalo Bills, and I would probably argue that it may have been a Pyrrhic victory for the sheer fact that they probably lost Von Miller to a significant amount of time, and hopefully for their sake, not for anything like really long term, but we'll see what happens there. It's still a pretty talented team, and even if you take him away from that roster, but nonetheless, Von Miller is a legend, Hall of Famer, definitely a big loss there. But the real thing that shocked me was 3rd and 1. You're essentially playing for the tie. You're deep into your own territory. Why on earth, Dan Campbell, are you passing the ball and giving the Bills the opportunity to win that game? I got to give Detroit credit where credit is due for hanging around. There's a reason why I went with them as kind of an upset special, even though I had the Bills winning that game outright. But just that whole play calling was mind blowing. And look, I love Dan Campbell just as much as the next guy, but he has made multiple bad in-game decisions that has cost the Lions victories. And, you know, as much as you love seeing players like want to play for him, biting kneecaps in the process just to win those games, like, I don't know that he's necessarily going to be there long-term because of decisions like that.
The Lions are 4-7. And the crazy thing is, if you look at their games this year and you look at how they've been playing, they could easily be 500. Heck, there even could be a way they could even be 7-4. You know what? They are not that far away. And they might be getting some reinforcements back, you know, in their first-round pick in Jameson Williams. He's close to returning too. But at the same time, you look at it from the Bills side of things, yeah, it's a win they needed to get now. They started out slow last week against the Browns there at Ford Field, and then they took off on the second half. But that was a big win for them. And how about that throw late from Allen to Diggs, which set them up for that game-winning field goal? And that's a big win there too. And now you just wonder, with the Von Miller injury, with Josh Allen still nursing that elbow, a couple of knick-knacking injuries, and depending on how long Von Miller is going to be out for, I think is also going to put a big impact on the Bills here, because Von's been playing extremely well. You know, he's that one missing piece on that defense that I think they needed. And now with him being out, it could be a big hit there for the Bills. But nevertheless, they do get the win, and they are 8-3, and they will play again this Thursday against the Patriots. And that was a much-needed win for them there. And again, the Lions, they're not that far out when you look at it. I mean, you're right now in a division with the Bears, who are not going anywhere, with the Packers, who, I mean, they're a mess, and the Vikings, who are, you know, really good. But at the same time, you know what? They've got the pieces right now. I mean, maybe the only other thing you would do is change the quarterback, although Jared Goff, for the most part, has done the job there in Detroit. But a big win there for the Bills. And then we get to our game in the middle of the day there, Hank. The Cowboys get past our Giants 28-20. You know, I look at this game, and first half, you know what? Considering what the Giants were down going into this matchup, I thought they played pretty well first half, all things told. But the second half was pretty much all Dallas. And I think what it showed, Hank, is, you know, this Giants team, I think, is good enough to beat mediocre to bad teams. But now you're going to go up against the upper echelon. You know, if you don't have your full complement of players, you're just not going to be able to get the job done. You know, with the Giants, we talked about it when we did our picks last week with the guys over there at Empty the Bench. When you don't have 3 offensive linemen, when you don't have 2 of your top receivers, and you don't have 2 cornerbacks against this Dallas team, you're going to struggle. And that's what happened in the second half. And I think this game also really turned on that drop from Saquon. But, Hank, you know, now this is 2 weeks in a row now. Bit of it concerning from the Giants, and also 2 weeks. And I'm curious what you think. 2 weeks in a row where you also kind of question Brian Daboll a little bit.
I don't know that I necessarily would question Brian Daboll as much. I mean, look, did he call the best game yesterday on Thursday? No, of course not. But with that having been said, given the circumstances, I don't think that game that he called was nearly as bad as what happened against Detroit. But that's a subject for another day, and that's something that you can kind of hear me talk about more if you want to check me out on Big Blue Avenue again. I did not mean to get a shameless self-promotion out there, but
okay.
It always happens whenever I talk about the Giants. And I don't even try. But anyways, back to the G-Men. Brian Daboll, I still think is doing a decent job, all things considered. But yeah, that play calling, going for the pass with Saquon at that point, I probably would not have done if I were the Giants. But as I said, that's pretty minor compared to other stuff going on. And, you know, as we mentioned, the Giants defense, even with all those injuries, they forced 2 turnovers from Dak Prescott in the first half. And then I think on the whole, the Cowboys at least had 3, whereas I don't think the Giants had too many turnovers, if at all. But with that having been said, the problem was the Cowboys are just the more talented team. And as much as I was happy that the Giants were leading at the half, I think if you were watching that game, you knew sooner or later the Cowboys were going to somehow find a way to come back. And the Giants could only like do so much to stop a far healthier and far superior Dallas Cowboys squad. But, you know, and you could also probably blame Wink Martindale a little bit, because I would say that some of the blitzes probably came at the wrong time. Like third and long, I'm not sure if I'm blitzing, like, if you know what I mean. So I'll definitely, you can blame him a little bit too, but again, at the same time, really no shame for the Giants in losing this game. And again, I'm not one of those guys that likes to use moral victories, if anything, far from it, because, you know, the Yankee fan mindset in me is my expectations are always going to be as high as the talent. And let's face it, the talent level that the Giants had was paper thin. However, there is one takeaway that I do have, and it is a question I'm interested to know what your opinion is, Johnny. And Tom and I have been talking about the Scavetta, that is. Sorry, not to confuse you, not to confuse everyone for our esteemed one of our esteemed Empty the Bench hosts. But Tom and I discussed, like, are you starting to get concerned that Saquon Barkley's injury is worse than you think, or that he's playing hurt? Because the last 2 games, he only had 22 yards against the Detroit Lions. And even though he did have that touchdown, he only had 39 rushing yards against the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Now, I think the situation with Detroit was Detroit's defense was actually not that bad and has been playing better, and I think they ran into a buzzsaw there. The Dallas one, short week, going down there to Dallas, again, a team that's very, very good defensively. I'm hoping that, you know, with the extra time off and now going to playing Washington on Sunday, if it happens again, Hank, then I'm going to be a bit concerned. But when I look at these last 2 opponents, Detroit's defense has been playing better. Even in the game against Buffalo, you know what? I mean, they still had chances to win, but their defense has been playing better. Dallas's upfront defense has always been a thing that's been concerning to me. So I would have to give it one more week and see. You know, now with 10 days in between games, that would be something. I mean, he's definitely, you know, he's carried the load. Literally, he has been carrying the load for the Giants in some games too. And yeah, you know what? If he's not getting it going, then that's going to be forcing Daniel Jones to be making more plays again. Now with, you know, already with a thin receiving core to begin with, and now without Wan'Dale Robinson, I am a little bit concerned. I think the concern level will be raised if it happens again against Washington on Sunday, which is also a possibility because Washington's been playing pretty well too, and their defensive front has been good as well. So it's definitely I am a little bit concerned. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, it's starting to range into the medium level there, Hank. And I would think I would be raising it a few more if this happens again on Sunday. But also at the same time, you know, as I said, he's been carrying the load here for the Giants a lot. It's hard to say that he could be doing this every single week, but you kind of need him to, given the situation that the Giants are in.
Yeah, I definitely would be agreeing with that. But as far as the rest of the thing with the Giants goes, I think next week is about, or sorry, this week. I can't even talk today. I'm like clearly on the struggle bus, but
that's okay.
It's what it is. This game against Washington is going to be about as must win and probably as close to a playoff game that we have seen in quite some time for the New York Football Giants. And, you know, I'm honestly nervous about this game. And the reason being partially because Washington has been hot so far or at least lately. But you look at the Commanders, they're a team that pretty much is right on the Giants level. So this game, get ready, Nick Morgeson, if you're listening to this. This game could honestly be anything. It could even be a mystery box.
I agree. And there's a couple of things to that. Washington's playing with confidence right now. They've been playing with confidence for weeks. Taylor Heineke's done a good job. That defense has been playing a lot better. And historically, Hank, the Giants just don't do well against divisional opponents. It's been happening.
They've done well against Washington, but that hasn't really been true since they hired a certain coach that I'm not going to say his name, but he's the guy that came in between Tom Coughlin and Pat Shurmur, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. They're almost better on the road against Washington versus being at home. And you know what? Now that's who the Commanders are playing the next two. They have the Giants in their next two games because they have a bye week sandwich in between. So, yeah, it's
actually no. I take that back. 2019 and 2020, we swapped them, but
yeah. This Washington team though is better than those years, and they're playing with confidence. And the Giants right now, it does look like the Giants are going to get some reinforcements back. It looks like it's starting to trend in that way. Some guys are practicing; it could be close to returning, and you need all the reinforcements you can get right now with this Giants team. So yeah, I am concerned, but at the same time, I'm still trusting Brian Daboll to turn this around. And I agree with you. I think next week is as much win as you can get, because then you get the Eagles after that, and we all know Philadelphia is at 10-1. So it's about as much win as you can get, and that's why that Detroit game was such a swing kind of game. Because let's say you beat Detroit, then you go, then you know what, this loss against the Cowboys, while it's bummer, you're not as bummed about it. But now, considering the injuries that the Giants have had here the last few weeks, and considering the injuries that you've had here the last few weeks, and now playing your divisional schedule, it's definitely something to keep an eye on for sure. But we'll find out how the Giants can do here. But yeah, no, it's a tough one right now. But they got it now, because you got to get to about 9 or 10 wins. I think you have to get to 10 wins here. And you look at their schedule, and I documented this with you guys last week. The Giants' strength of schedule, the rest of the way here, is very challenging. Because not only is it the divisional opponents, but you've got Minnesota, and I think still have to go to Indianapolis. And we all know about road games. Road games against anybody are a toss-up. We've seen that this year. So a very, very daunting challenge here for the Giants, who fall 7-4. Cowboys go to 8-3. Vikings get past the Patriots.
I do want to put this one thing in perspective, though. Sorry to stop you.
Yeah, that's okay.
Let me just ask all Giant fans this: 7-4. I never told you how they're going to get to 7-4, but they're 7-4 at this point in the season. And I also told you that they would be playing meaningful games past Thanksgiving, when in years past they haven't even played meaningful games past Columbus Day. How are we feeling? Like, I definitely am saying sign me up. Granted, like you said, the schedule is going to be pretty tough, especially with that Philly game sandwiched in between the two games against, I'm still going to call them the football team. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Then you've got the Colts and the Vikings and another game with the Eagles. Like, not easy, but do I think it's doable? Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Because they could probably shock Philadelphia in one of those games, and that Philadelphia might not even playing for anything in one of the later games too.
That's a great point there. That Week 18 game in Philadelphia, they might have things already clinched by then, so you never know. And Hank, we know this too. This league is so week to week. I mean, it's as unpredictable as it's ever been before. So absolutely they could do this. I mean, the Giants have also showed this year against good teams that they can get the job done. I mean, they've beaten the Ravens at home, come back from 10 points down. So they definitely have the potential to do it. And I think it's certainly possible. And yeah, if you would have told me 7-4 after Thanksgiving, I mean, I would be jumping for joy right now, considering during our preview show, I said that at max they were a 7-win team. And I know Tom, who we did have on our show at the start of the season, told us that 7 or 8 wins could be potential. But look at them now, 7-4, playing very good schedule, and I think it's a good test for them. And you know what, I do trust Daboll, and I think they will find a way to get a few more wins here. But at the same time, if they finish 7-10 the way this has been, I mean, it's going to be kind of a bummer. That's what I would say about that. But yeah, 7-4. I mean, look, it's still been a very, very great start to the year, and we knew that they were going to run through some injury problems. I mean, they were pretty healthy, all things told, considering going into the last couple of weeks. But now they're starting to have their first real adverse test, and it really all started with that game in Jacksonville when Evan Neal went down for a couple of weeks. And since then, they've had other guys go down. Adoree Jackson, who's a big loss. Wan'Dale Robinson, who actually really been starting to find his form. Then he unfortunately tears his ACL against Detroit. But you know what? Injuries going to happen. We've seen this league. Look at how many guys are going down right now. I mean, it is unbelievable. I mean, I'm sure the Ram fans don't want to hear from us when their quarterbacks in concussion protocol may not play again, and their top 2 receivers are out. So, it's a week to week league, and injuries are going to happen. So, it's going to be next man up, and the Giants have actually shown that next man up mentality. I mean, they're guys that are making catches and having touchdowns from the practice squad. Like who's a Cager? He's had plays. So everybody's just got to step up and get the job done. And I think the Giants can definitely do that. But I agree with you. This game against Washington on Sundays is as must-win as can be, considering you've got Philadelphia and then you've got to go to Washington and you've got the Vikings still on the schedule as well. Speaking of those Vikings, they got past the Patriots on Thursday night, 33-26. There was a nice bounce-back win after getting blown out the previous week to the Cowboys. And they go to 9-2. And they go to 9-2, Hank, and they have a plus point differential for the season at +5 after their 7-point win against the Pats on Thursday. And then I want to start this Sunday slate. I want to talk about my Panthers. And I say my Panthers because I was the only one to pick them over those Broncos 23-10. Sam Darnold stepped in. What's that?
Let's ride.
They're not riding. They can't get out of first gear the Broncos, and this is the lowest point of the season for Denver. When you see the defense questioning Russell Wilson, when Sam Darnold's having a pretty good game, and I said you got to watch Sam Darnold by accident. He's going to play better than Baker Mayfield, and he did. And all of a sudden now those Panthers are 4-8 and only a game behind as the Buccaneers fell to the Browns 23-17 in overtime. But before I get to there, the Broncos, I mean, how low can it get here? This is the lowest point of the season. Russell Wilson, again, another brutal game. At one point it took them like 12 downs to get their only touchdown. It's bad over there. For Carolina, let's be fair. They Matt Rule gets fired. Steve Wilkes steps in. They trade Christian McCaffrey. They're on their third quarterback of the season, and they're still competitive and still in it.
Yeah, no, I'll give the Panthers credit where credit is due for being able to somehow find a way and still be in that poor excuse of a competition that is the NFC South. But at the same time, this loss has a lot, or this win for them has a lot more to do with the quality of their opponent than so much about them really staying in things. Although maybe Sam Darnold resurrects his career, who knows? I'm not betting my house on that, but it's possible.
Hey, he sure is. I mean, he could be a backup or so on a team next year. And speaking of that, that's why I want to get to this Bucs-Browns game for a minute here, because a lot of storylines with this one. The loss by the Buccaneers, and not only is because of their loss, but their offensive lineman Tristan Wirfs gets injured again and is going to be out multiple weeks, and that's a big blow for the Bucs. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, if you remember when the Bucs were getting to their playoff mode last year, they were down 3 offensive linemen, and Brady was getting sacked left and right there and pressured by the Rams. And now, if you're down multiple offensive linemen, the Bucs are going to be in big trouble here. I mean, that's the one thing. You don't have a running game there in Tampa Bay right now. Brady is, let's be fair. I know he's played well the last couple of weeks. He's played better, but now if you're down offensive linemen, you can't run the ball. Tampa's got problems now. And for the Browns, I have to say, I thought it was a cool storyline to see Jacoby Brissett being able to lead Cleveland to a win in what is looks like his last regular season start, barring an injury to Watson. But that was a cool thing too. And you know what? I have to say this: Jacoby Brissett has done as well as you probably could expect him to the point where I think some team will definitely take a shot at him next year. And don't be surprised if somebody lands him and he competes for a starting job next year as well.
Yeah, I definitely think he's won a bit of auditions with some teams who we don't even know are looking on and seeing the potential in him as a backup. And that was definitely a cool comeback by the Browns. But Johnny, are you ready for a little fun fact here about this game?
Absolutely.
Until that game, Tom Brady was 218-0 with a lead and under 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
There was a lot of crazy stuff that came out of Week 12.
218-1, 218 wins and 1 giant loss. Well, actually, it doesn't have the same if you subtract the 200, and you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely, I sure do. I just really wonder now, and they've got a huge game next Monday against the Saints. Those offensive linemen, not being there. I said last week, I thought the Bucs had a chance to really take off now. You had a chance to bury them, and here they are in that terrible division. But now with the injuries that they now have on the line, Brady's going to have to, air it out a lot, and we'll have to. And I don't know if he's going to be able to do that if all these guys are going to go down.
Yep, I think the Bucs are definitely in trouble. And by the way, another thing that happened in that game was Todd Bowles definitely screwed up too, because he didn't call that timeout with like a minute left and Cleveland driving to tie the game, when you have Tom Brady, who, if Cleveland, somehow scores, Brady still has more time. You've seen what he can do historically. It just, I don't know. It makes no sense. I hate when these coaches like misuse their time.
That's another thing we saw a lot of too, and we've been seeing this year. Coaching has been costing teams a lot of games, and that happened there. And
let me put it this way: when Jaguar Gator 9 makes a lot of dumb decisions, highlight videos, that tells you something for this year alone.
Absolutely. And speaking of coaching, I'm going to talk about coaching in a positive sense, because I loved what Doug Peterson did down there in Jacksonville, allowing the Jaguars to win 28-27 over the Ravens. First of all, Trevor Lawrence, how about Trevor Lawrence leading them down, that unbelievable touchdown for the Jaguars to come back, before they went for 2 there. It was a heck of a catch by Jones in the end zone, and Trevor with a comeback win against the Jaguars, and then they go for 2, which I love that call at first glance there for Jacksonville. I mean, they're not playing for much anyway. They're maybe being spoilers to the Ravens in this spot, and they get the job done. And it was crazy because, this is why I said they should go for it, because even if it's going to be, even if they go tie it up, it's not out of the Ravens' realm that they get down, and Justin Tucker kicks a game-winning field goal, and he almost did from 67 yards out. And Hank, at first glance, when I saw that ball get kicked and the way that camera angle looked, I thought Tucker had it, and it fell just short.
Yeah, it's rare to see him miss those, isn't it?
Very, very rare. I think they said he made like 65 straight before that, but this was totally like out of the realm. I think he had a 66-yarder there in Detroit last year, but that's indoors. Maybe if this was indoors, maybe that gets the job done. But it was just short.
Yeah, I definitely a shocker, but I love the idea of going for 2 in there. Like, the Jaguars at this point had nothing to lose, and I think that was Trevor Lawrence's first big comeback win in the NFL too.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to see. I think there was a crazy stat. I know there was a crazy stat with the I thought there was a crazy stat with Trevor that it was his first win, and that the Jaguars were the Jaguars, I think their record when they were down by 7 points with a minute to go, I think they were like 1-75 or something when they were inside of a minute, when they were down by 7 points in the last minute of the game. And Lawrence let them down. They were trailing for most of the game. Lawrence led them to that game-winning drive, and it was just absolutely amazing. And, on a day where, Travis Etienne gets injured again, unfortunately, for the Jags, and on right after 24 hours after Lawrence's replacement there at Clemson can't lead them to a win against South Carolina, and he's throwing terrible throws with DJ Uiagalelei going 8 of 29 for 99 yards for Clemson against South Carolina, and then you see Trevor Lawrence here get the job done for the Jaguars. It was a pretty cool thing to see for Trevor, and I've always been a fan of his. And unfortunately his teammate got hurt with a foot injury. But no, great moment there in Jacksonville. And again, you know what? Jacksonville is a team that I feel like is taking strides. And I will say this, I think that trade for Calvin Ridley, even though he's not eligible until next year, I think is going to definitely help them. to go along with Christian Kirk, give Lawrence another weapon. And I trust Doug Peterson. And look, I love that call at first glance. Even if it did not work out, I loved going for 2 in that spot for Doug Peterson. And you know what? I think he's helping too. And you've seen Trevor have some moments this year. Remember, in his rookie year, he didn't really get going until that Week 18 game against the Colts. But this year, he's had some great moments. And Jacksonville's been in a lot of games. I know, Hank, you've been high on the Jaguars pretty much all season too.
Yeah, and I still think and I've had a good reason, because Trevor Lawrence looks like he could be the guy, but they've also blown a good amount of leads this year. So I really think they should be better than where they are. And the numbers will tell you, like, they historically, again, this was a stat that I got from Jaguar Gator 9, so I cannot take credit for that. I think the Jaguars had one of the better point differentials in football, and yet somehow they've still been losing a lot of games. It's nuts.
Yeah, and that's just another sign of how crazy football has been, in that look at the Vikings. The Vikings are 9-2, and they have a +5 differential, and they were a minus going into the game last week on Thanksgiving. By the way, the Jaguars were 0-162 since 2000, when they were down by 7+ points in the final 2 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. And even a stat that I forgot to bring up with the Thanksgiving Day games was that was the first time since, I think it was 1934, that you had 3-1 score finishes. So it's fun facts galore.
That is nuts.
Yeah, first time since 1926, 3+ Thanksgiving Day games finished within 1 score. But wait,
give the Giants credit for covering.
Oh yeah, we took Dallas. That's a bad beat right there. But nevertheless, just continuing with this, the Dolphins get past the Texans 30-15. By the way, another fun fact here: the Dolphins 30-0 lead over the Texans, second largest first half lead over the last 30 seasons. And yeah, I mean, with the Texans, I mean, I don't know what else you could say there. In that, you had Kyle Allen starting. Texans, I mean, look, they're going to get the first pick in the draft, and the only question is going to be is what quarterback are they going to take in the draft, because the draft's going to have a lot of quarterbacks coming out. The Bryce Youngs of the world, the Michael Penixes, the Will Levises of the world, the C.J. Strouds. So they're going to have their choice there, but we all know the Texans are going for a quarterback in the draft, and barring something crazy, these final 5 weeks or 5-6 weeks or so, they are going to have the first pick in the draft there. But the Dolphins continue their offensive onslaught, 30-15 win. Only negative for Miami was that their offensive tackle, Teron Armstead, who they brought in this offseason, got hurt. He's going to be out a few weeks as well. Speaking of quarterbacks and craziness, Hank, the Jets got past the Bears 31-10. And the crazy thing here was just prior to the game that we didn't know exactly if it was going to be Justin Fields. I mean, we thought it was a long shot, but then it's who's going to be starting in his place. Originally, it was going to be Trevor Siemian, and then in pregame warm-ups, what's that?
Peter Meme.
Yeah. So Simeon's warming up, and then he hurts himself, and then they're talking about Nathan Peterman coming in, and it's like, oh my gosh. I mean, as if this game can't get any uglier. And then right before kickoff, they're going back to Trevor Siemian to start. And we all know for the Jets that Zach Wilson got benched and Mike White stepped in, and Mike White picked up right where he left off last year, 300+ yards, multiple touchdowns, Garrett Wilson with 2 touchdown catches, and the Jets bounced back after. I mean, Mike White kind of matched Zach Wilson's production in the first quarter, and I don't think it mattered if it was going to be Zach, if it was going to be White, if it was going to be Joe Flacco, or anybody starting for the Jets there against that defense for the Bears. But Jets get a much-needed win, have a good test coming up on Sunday against the Vikings, and the Bears just, no defense, no quarterback, no chance for Chicago as the Jets get the win. The Bengals get past the Titans, big win for Cincinnati with Jamar Chase still being out. They win 20-16 against the Titans. I thought the Titans had a chance here considering Derrick Henry was healthy versus last year in their playoff rematch, and the Bengals were missing Jamar Chase, but Joe Burrow playing a lot better after that first game, and the Bengals get the win there.
You know, I think Joe Burrow, you could use a certain Aaron Rodgers line that I know a certain member of our network dislikes, but definitely good for the Bengals. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they're now tied for first place.
They are both, yes, the Ravens and the Bengals are both 7-4. And you know what? Burrow can say that because he can back it up, and he's got the team to do that. The other guy doesn't have it. And we're going to get to him in just a moment. You were talking about the Commanders. They get past the Falcons 19-13. Big win for them to go to 7-5. And then we get to the late
story for me isn't even the game itself, though. The Sean Taylor mannequin. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
How are there people that still not only support them, but are willing to give money to Dan Snyder? I don't get it.
I don't even know what I could possibly say about that. That was so just out of touch. But yeah, unfortunately, with Dan Campbell, it's like something you've just grown accustomed to. And
Dan Snyder. No, Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell's a nice guy. He's not nearly.
Did I say Dan Campbell?
Yes.
That's what happens when
no, Dan Campbell is one of us.
Yeah.
I still think of him as a Giant legend. Yeah. And good tight end. Dan Campbell, even though he may be crazy to suggest biting off people's kneecaps, he's still a much nicer guy than Dan Snyder ever was.
Yeah, Snyder's got to go. And I know that we've spoken about him putting that, supposedly putting the first steps into selling the team. Couldn't come soon enough down there in Washington. I mean, look, you do have a 7-5 team on the field. You know what? You've got a team now that definitely is competing. You know, Ron Rivera has done a great job, especially, you know, really this season turned around after that win against the Bears when Rivera goes into the post-game and, you know, has that very emphatic post-game press conference, the post-game locker room stuff, and then Taylor Heineke comes in for the injured Carson Wentz, and he's definitely given that team confidence. They're playing with confidence. You know, Allen Robinson's back running the ball. Their defense has been great. That's kind of like why I'm pretty nervous for the Giants playing them, because they're playing the Commanders at a time where they're playing with confidence, and the Giants are very banged up. And we'll see there. But a big win for Washington on the field to get to 7-5. Let me for maybe the first time since he's been a head coach, Hank, give Brandon Staley. Let me say that he did a good job, because another team in the Chargers who go for two late, take and win the game 25-24 over the Cardinals. You know how I have been against Brandon Staley, but you know what? That play call first guess, I liked it a lot, and it's a big win for the Chargers to get to 6-5, because I mean, any hopes that they have right now in that division with the Chiefs, who got to 9-2. I mean, if you were 5-6 with all those injuries and stuff that you had, I mean, the Chargers would have been just, you know, competing for a wild card spot pretty much. But the Chargers get the win, and they go to 6-5. Crazy overtime game. Raiders over the Seahawks, 40-34. Raiders are one of those teams. What's that?
Huge for us because it helps the Giants.
Absolutely, yeah. And I can't figure the Raiders out. They're such a hard team to figure out, and now they have 2 straight wins in overtime. Raiders go to 4-7. Josh Jacobs, a huge day running the ball. Just nuts. Raiders I can't figure out. I mean, they're only 4-7, but they've played some crazy games this year.
Yeah, I would definitely happen to agree, and it's what makes a lot of the losses they've had like all the more like mind-boggling and crazy, because like you turn half of them around, I think they might be competing in that division, and they probably would even have a playoff spot at this point. But again, should have kept Bisaccia. But at the same time, as Giant fans, we appreciate them helping us out and beating Seattle, because had Seattle won, they would have the tiebreaker, and the Giants' playoff hopes would be a bit dicier.
Definitely. And here's another fun fact for you coming out of week 12. Josh Jacobs, the only player since at least 1950 with 225 plus rushing yards and 70 plus receiving yards in a single game.
Wow.
And he's doing that, with injuries that they've had to Waller and to Hunter Renfrow and Devontae Adams not being the Devontae Adams they thought they were getting, and Derek Carr, who's been, remember Derek Carr got hurt very early on, missed the play. There was a scare there, but he came back in and they were able to get the win. The Chiefs get past the Rams 26-10. The Rams playing with no Cooper Kupp, no who was it? Allen Robinson was also out, and also Bryce Perkins starting there, and the Chiefs able to win 26-10. So Kansas City goes to 9-2 as Travis Kelce now with the most receiving yards as in a tight end. His first 11 seasons in NFL history. He did it in his 10th season, and he did not catch a pass as a rookie. So unbelievable the link there. Also with, when you also have Patrick Mahomes most of the time throwing the ball to you, that helps too. But Kansas City wins 26-10. 49ers 13-0 over the Saints. By the way, here's another fun fact. The Saints snapped the NFL's longest active streak without being shut out, 332 games. The last time they were shut out prior to Sunday, week 17 of 2001, also against the 49ers.
Wow.
So fun facts galore there as San Francisco goes to 7.
Or actually, let me do that Owen Wilson style. Wow.
It's just been a crazy time. So they get the win. Eagles over the Packers.
Another fun fact, by the way, is the 49ers also for consecutive weeks have not allowed points in the second half.
Yeah, I tell you, they seem to be right now maybe the most complete team.
I think they are.
Right? Defensively. Now, they did suffer. Elijah Mitchell did get hurt again, but nevertheless, you've got McCaffrey, you've got Garoppolo, you've got receiving core, you got a defense there. I mean, as of right now, 12 weeks in, I think they could be considered the most complete team. And I even say that with the Eagles being 10-1 right now after their 40-33 win on Sunday Night Football against the Packers. I still think it's crazy to say. I almost would trust the 49ers more than the Eagles right now. But nevertheless, Eagles win. Storyline out of Sunday Night Football: Aaron Rodgers hurt again. Now, this is a rib injury that he was dealing with, that he had. Jordan Love ended up taking over. Now we found out that we found a couple of things, that originally his thumb injury is actually worse than it was originally indicated. I mean, we saw that, you saw that thing, his one of his locker room conferences that he was talking about that he's been playing with this since week 5, and that surgery was that he wasn't going to need surgery. Well, it was also reported that he's actually dealing with a fracture, and that surgery could be a possibility. And now that's on top of the rib injury. Now, Rodgers did have his weekly segment with Pat McAfee on the Pat McAfee show and said that the tests actually came back good and that he is going to play Sunday. But I tell you, I mean, it's like, how many more hits can he take, and what is it going to take before we see Jordan Love consistently? I mean, are we starting to see the end of Aaron Rodgers here, Hank, considering that the Packers right now are really on life support? They got to pretty much win out just to have a chance here. I think it's only going to be a matter of time before we start seeing Jordan Love in there. But you know what? This is what happens when you pay your starting quarterbacks $50 million a year.
But hey, don't worry, Packer fans. All I can do is RELAX.
Yeah, and they're going to keep telling you, keep playing that on April 1st. That's what it really feels like. They know better. Green Bay fans know better. That's for sure. But yeah, they fall to 4-8. And then the Monday night game, Steelers 24-17 over the Colts. Kudos to all of us for all taking the Steelers in an upset special there on Monday. And again, speaking of coaching, I know he's only an interim, and I know he really hasn't coached, but Jeff Saturday, late in that game, I mean, he
these coaches are just allergic to using timeouts.
I mean, he admitted on Tuesday that he made a mistake, but I mean, geez, But Kenny Pickett, you know what? Give Kenny Pickett a lot of credit because he's been He's actually done all right there for the Steelers. So they get the win there, and they go to 4-7. The Colts fall to 4-7-1, and that wraps up what was really a crazy week 12 in the NFL. And I'll tell you what, when we get to week 13, we're going to do the Thursday night game, and then we'll do all of our other picks on Friday. But I tell you, this week coming up, Hank, is just absolutely awesome. A lot of great games coming up. And before we get to the pick for week 13, let's go over a couple of storylines. We spoke about Aaron Rodgers, but the other person there are two big players that are still in the news, and one of them is a free agent, and we know him, Odell Beckham. So he's going to start his visit schedule this week, and it's being reported he's going to visit with the Cowboys, the Giants, and then the Cowboys and the Bills. I'll tell you what, I've said this before as a Giant fan. I know you and Tom have spoken about this too, and I'm going to just put it out there right now. And this has anything to do with the antics that we found out on Sunday. If I'm the Giants, I don't go anywhere near Beckham. And it's not the antics. Here's the thing. We don't know what Odell's going to give you this year because he's still recovering from that torn ACL. And we have to remember, he suffered that in the Super Bowl. It's not like he suffered that during the regular season last year where maybe he could come back at season's end. He suffered this in the Super Bowl. Do we know that he's even going to be a factor this year?
Well, no. And the other thing is, how much money was he going to be asking for? Like, I said it a lot. Like, you can't throw a Band-Aid at or in this case, the Band-Aid being like a good amount of money at a wide receiver that's really only going to be a short-term problem. That's an expensive Band-Aid if we're being honest. And I certainly would not throw a blank check at that either.
No, I mean, I can go out there and I could sign wide receivers to contracts and, have depth at the receiving core. I mean, let's be fair. Let's look at the Giants receiving core is not, the most talented in the world, but it's got options and they've all been contributing. And, for the Giants who have been salary strapped for a while, I know it's going to get better, but do you want to go down that road again and put all your eggs into one basket?
I would say no.
And for a guy that's, coming off of another torn ACL, I mean, if he doesn't play this year, and I don't know if he's going to be playing this year, and if he is, to what effect? So he's going to go almost 2 seasons about a year and a half in between games. I mean, is that where you want to really want to go here? I'd keep him far away. And then also, as a result of this too, is the antics. And this story that came out over the weekend regarding the flight. He was removed from a flight on Sunday in Miami. Look, this is, Odell Beckham's one of those guys. Look, doesn't do criminally bad things, but his judgment and, we've talked about this with Baker Mayfield. We've talked about this with Kyrie Irving. They don't do criminally bad things, but they just do things that just annoy you, boggle the mind, and it's like you just don't want any of those antics. And for the Giants team that, has got a locker room that's very, very close, and I think Brian Daboll's got a lot of credit to do with that. I think Joe Shane's got a lot of credit to do with that, this coaching staff. Do you want to go down that road too? So there's 2 things to this too. We're not even, look, the talent's there. We're not questioning the talent, but we are questioning the fact that he's coming off of another torn ACL and that he continues to get himself always be in the news for a lot of the wrong reason. And if you're a team that's still trying to, again, Giants are still rebuilding here. So do you want to go down that road? I don't.
No.
I say this as a Giants fan. I wouldn't sign him. I wouldn't sign him for the money angle, the fact that, they're still rebuilding. I would rather go sign 3 to 4 receivers with that kind of money. I'll go into the NFL draft and I'll go draft a receiver. I'll go do that. I know they wouldn't get him, but I would love Marvin Harrison from Ohio State. Now, obviously, they're not going to do that because they're going to be too good this year. But I would go take my chances in the draft. I would go out there. I'll go sign guys off the practice squad. Look at the guys that are coming out of nowhere from the Giants and getting the job done. You know what? I will take that chance before I take my chance with somebody who's coming off of a torn ACL, who's always, doesn't use the best judgment, is always in the news. I'll keep him away. I'll tell you this. I've said this, Hank. To me, I mean, it has Cowboys written all over it for me if I had a guess with Beckham. And we all know the antics are going to scare the Cowboys away. I mean, they've brought in guys. They've had guys who don't have the best judgment in the world. We know that. So to me, I mean, that's not going to stop Dallas from getting him. I actually think Dallas needs him more than the Giants need him. I know the Bills have been supposedly in play. I think the 49ers are an outside shot. I wouldn't rule them out. I know their name was not really talked about. I mean, it was talked about a little bit, but not that much. But to me, it's just Odell Beckham and the Cowboys. Just like it just seems like that's where he's going.
Yeah, no, I'd stay away if I'm the G-man.
So yeah, I think it's going to be soon. And again, we don't even know if he's really going to be a factor here in 2022. So that's what you have to really wonder. And you know, like you said, Hank, what's the contract going to be with Beckham? You know, not only is it the length, but you know, the guaranteed money. That's what we really have to wonder here with Beckham. And I just don't, if I'm the Giants, I can't do that. I cannot be going down this road again. And especially when you're the Giants and you have decisions to make with Daniel Jones, with Saquon Barkley. Those to me are more pressing matters than Odell Beckham.
Yeah. Again, 100%.
So we'll see what happens. And of course, one of the other big storylines as we get ready for week 13 here of the league is one Deshaun Watson, and he's been compliant with the suspension terms, and the Cleveland Browns have officially added the quarterback to the 53-man active roster, and he will start Sunday against the Houston Texans. And of course, it is not a coincidence that his suspension was only 11 games and that he gets to come back against the Houston Texans. And Hank, the one other thing here too is there's Tony Busby, the attorney, supposedly bringing 10 accusers to Houston for this game, of course, because there wouldn't be, this Brown Texan game needed, more drama, considering that these two teams are, combined 5-16, 5-16-1. I mean, what else would you need? But the thing I have with this, and I understand that he is a member of the Browns. He is their teammate and stuff. And I understand that he's been compliant with the suspension terms. But, just as all this like antics with the Browns, social media accounts about him being back and, the stuff, it's just like, the optics just look so weird, especially when you have guys like Calvin Ridley, who was suspended for the full season for not doing anything criminal. Is just, and I understand there wasn't a criminal thing with Watson. I mean, it was gone away in criminal court, but still just the optics of all this are just weird. And now the whole Busby angle too. It's, this will definitely be something talked about going into Sunday. I mean, there's a lot of great games on Sunday, but obviously this has been something we've talked about all off season, right at the start of the season, when the decision was made, when they had agreed to 11 games, but Watson's officially back now with the Browns.
Oh boy, him against the Texans. This sounds like a real circus, does it not?
Yeah, this is not going to be must-see TV. I mean, again, I'm all the games that are going on Sunday. I mean, I will, of course, I'll be scanning in and out of it because it is football, nevertheless. But you look at all these matchups that are happening on Sunday. That's definitely not one that I'm going to be glued into as well. But Deshaun Watson's been in the news all season. The suspension is officially lifted. But it doesn't mean that this story is going to go away. That's for sure. So Watson officially back there with the Browns, and he will start Sunday as the Browns take on the Texans. Again, a matchup of two teams that are combined 5-16-1. Must-see TV? I don't think so. But we will find out there. But speaking of Week 13, Hank, it gets going on Thursday Night Football between the Buffalo Bills and New England Patriots up there in Foxborough, with Al, Kirk, and Kaylee on Amazon Prime. A huge game when you look at it. And again, the Bills both of these teams did play last Thursday, so both with equal amount of time off getting ready for this game. Game's up there in Foxborough. Bills dealing with some lingering injuries, but obviously they're the leaders here in the AFC East. They are a 4.5-point favorite as they take on the Patriots.
Yeah, I'm going to definitely take the Bills in that spread here because obviously I think how high I am on the Buffalo train. I think Patriots, while they can always get motivated against the New York Jets, you've seen it in years past. I do not think they are going to be able to stop the Bills' offensive attack with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs.
You know what? The reason why I'm taking Buffalo too is that they're only laying 4.5 points.
Yeah.
If this was, let's say, like the 9-point spread that we saw last Thursday on Thanksgiving against the Lions, I actually think I would take New England this time. But New England, to me, I mean, they just came off giving up 33 points to the Vikings. I know they're home, but they were home against the Bears and gave up 33 points. I just wonder now, with Von Miller not being there, if supposedly he could still play, or because that's the thing, his knee injury is tricky because there's a possibility he could be playing with a brace. There's a possibility he could be out for the rest of the season. It is that that polarizing, but because they're only laying 4.5, I am going to take the Bills to win and cover in Foxborough. That's what we're going to go with. And we come off a week last week where Hank and I both went 8-8, and we'll see what we can do for you here. And, of course, our full slate of NFL picks will drop on Friday. It's part of our Football Friday here on Game On. Well, Hank, let's get to a little bit of baseball here as the offseason keeps rolling on. There's been a couple of big storylines here. Obviously, well, one of them, locally with us is Aaron Judge. He was out in San Francisco. Everybody making a big deal about that because we all know the Giants have been in play for Judge. But the two big names that have been in the news this past week, number one, Bryce Harper with the Phillies. So he officially did have elbow surgery, and I think it was Tommy John. And the Phillies are saying that he should be back by the All-Star break as the DH and by the end of the season as an outfielder. So we all know Harper was dealing with elbow problems towards the end of the year, but this now all of a sudden creates a little bit of a hole there for Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think the Phillies are definitely, if they can go maybe like 5 games above 500 at the All-Star break, or not even that, I would say just stay within like 5 games of like either first of the wild card spot, I think they should be in decent shape. But even so, the Phillies still have a really good lineup to where I think they will probably be a threat in that division and really the National League. And we saw what happened last year. They pretty much came out of nowhere and, they pushed the Astros to their limit. But I do think without having Bryce Harper, that could be a pretty big setback for the Philadelphia Phillies. But again, they stay within the range that I said, they'll be okay.
Yeah, it's crazy because I think I'm agreeing with you. I don't think this is as big of a hit as people are going to say. And I will say this, because one of the teams to watch for in this division is going to be the Mets, because, they have to decide, what's going on with DeGrom, what's happening with Bassett. We obviously have Scherzer, but, this rotation for the Mets, I mean, if they don't have, their full complement of guys come back, I mean, they're going to, I'm expecting them to, they're not going to have 101 wins next season. I mean, and I'll say this, it doesn't look like Brandon Nimmo's coming back here because, I mean, you hear the reports about what they think he can go for. I mean, I know Steve Cohen's got money, but I don't know if he's going to dish out $100 million to Brandon Nimmo, and that's going to be a hit too if he doesn't come back. So they're going to probably not win 101 games. I think the Phillies have enough that they can survive, and then you get somebody like this back, and Harper does what he does. I mean, I think this is survivable. That's what I would say with the Phillies thing. I think it is survivable. That's what I would go with here too. I would go with. I mean, it was inevitable that he was going to have the surgery, but yeah, I don't think it's as much of a hit as people are saying. Of course, it'll be a blow in the short term, but I think they're going to be just all right there in Philadelphia. And then, speaking of, you had brought up the Astros. Well, they made a big signing recently. Jose Abreu, 3-year contract for the Astros. So they're going to move on, it looks like, from Yuri Gurriel. And, man, I'll tell you, champs only get stronger, Hank.
Yeah, no, I made a short video about that on the Regan Preview channel. Again, shameless self-promotion that I didn't intentionally try to do. Of course I love those guys. Why?
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, you do too, and
I sure do. It's my home.
But I talked about that signing a little bit on a short video, and I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version of it. I think the Astros made a good deal. Now, granted, could you argue that the money was pretty high? Yeah, probably, but first basemen don't necessarily come cheaply, and you had to find somebody to replace Yuli Gurriel at first base, and you're still getting a guy who, even at 35, can still hit for power and still hit for average in that lineup with Altuve and Bregman and Yordan Alvarez. It's a win for the Astros. Are you kidding?
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, I totally agree. And so the rich only get richer, it seems like. And as far as the Yanks go, still waiting to hear what's going to happen with Judge. That's going to be really how this whole offseason goes. I mean, they did bring back Anthony Rizzo, which I liked, but I don't know what's going to happen with Judge. I think this drama about him being in San Francisco, I think it's just a little bit of added drama. We'll find out, but that's what's going on there. And then, Hank, also big thing here. So the 2023 baseball era ballot. So the 8 former big league players comprised the contemporary baseball era players ballot to be reviewed and voted upon December 4th at the baseball winter meetings. And the results of this will be announced at 8 p.m. Eastern on December 4th, live on the MLB Network. So you got Albert Bell, Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Don Mattingly, Fred McGriff, Dale Murphy, Rafael Palmeiro, and Curt Schilling as the candidates. I don't think any of those guys are going to get it. The thing that I've heard is, as tough as it is to get on the Hall of Fame, to get voted in the first go around, this is, I've heard, to be even tougher. And to me, I don't think any of those guys are going to get in.
Yeah, Rolen, I think, is a very underrated third baseman, but I think it may be a while before he's one that gets in. And you've got so many other guys on the steroid era that are in too.
Well, that's the regular one. I'm going to get to that in just a second. But this one, the baseball writer, the BBWA, those 8 guys, that's the contemporary era ballot. That's where the this is the
I don't
remember committee.
Well, so here are the guys that I would vote in, and one of them may come across as biased, but Dale Murphy, I think, should absolutely be in. He was one of the greatest home run hitters during the 80s, and he's a guy that you want to talk about guys that represented baseball with honesty and integrity, and you see how that's a factor in voting. I would probably imagine he's a guy that probably should be getting some votes if you wanted to look at it from that angle. And I would also have to put Don Mattingly up there. And again, told you that was probably going to be biased, but again, you look at the numbers, very similar to Kirby Puckett, and you look at Mattingly from 84 to 88, probably 88 or 89-ish. He might have very well have been the best player in baseball. And not to mention, he was, if not for Keith Hernandez, I think you could probably make a case that Don Mattingly was one of, if not the greatest fielding first baseman of all time. Or at the very least in that decade, or his own city for that matter.
And you know what? They've never been linked to steroid use like those other guys have been. Or, Curt Schilling with his, his political
Now, Keith Hernandez is another guy that should be in Hall of Fame. That's a discussion for another day.
That's fair. Yeah, absolutely. I just, I remember Tim Kurkjian, the Hall of Fame writer, the ESPN guy. I remember him coming on one day and saying that as tough as it is to get into the Hall of Fame, when you have to go through this 16-person committee, this is even tougher. And I think you need 75%, which means you need 12 out of 16 to get in. I don't think this committee is going to vote for, guys that have been linked to steroids like Bonds and Clemens and Palmeiro. And Curt Schilling, I mean, look, his numbers are great, but his political stuff is scaring. I mean, let's just be honest. His political stuff is scaring people away from voting for him. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And whatever you want to make of it, I mean, I'm just out there saying that whatever you think about it, I mean, it's definitely having an impact for sure. So my guess would be.
Well, remember when Schilling wanted his name off the ballot? So that
he said that, but the committee, but the Hall of Fame would not do that. I mean, I don't know what the rules are to take yourself off of a ballot. I mean, I think you have to do something criminal in order for that to happen. But I don't remember anybody ever being taken off of a ballot unless it was for some sort of criminal thing. But I don't know if that's ever happened before. But yeah, I remember him saying that. But I remember the original Baseball Hall of Fame ballot did not do that. But as far as this committee, which is going to get announced on December the 4th, I don't think any of those 8 guys are getting in. And I could be wrong. I mean, maybe you're right. I think like the Dale Murphys and the Don Mattingleys have the best chance, but I just don't know. We'll see there. Now, as far as the 2023 Hall of Fame ballot, the Baseball Hall of Fame ballot, this one is interesting because I look at all of these names, and to me, Scott Rowland is trending in the right direction. You've seen that in the prior votes in prior years. I think he's got a chance to get in. But the guy, to me, he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer. But the one guy to watch in this list, Hank, is Beltran. Now, I just wonder how much the cheating scandal is going to play an impact on Beltran. Because if you remember, he was he probably was the one guy that probably took the biggest punishment of anybody, because he was going to become the Met manager, and then the Mets took him off because of the news that came out about the cheating stuff, So Beltran, to me, is a Hall of Famer, but he's not a first ballot one. But to me, Scott Rowland's trending in the right direction. And when you look at the rest of these players, I don't know who else is there. I mean, you want to say maybe Todd Helton, but
Andrew Jones should be in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. Andrew Jones should be in. He was one of the more underrated hitters of our generation.
And a great center fielder, too, defensively.
Yeah. Vizquel's probably not going to be in because he has some pretty bad skeletons in his closet with domestic violence. And it's a damn shame, too, because I think Vizquel was one of the best defensive shortstops in baseball history. And A-Rod, mystery box. Probably not, given his reputation.
Now, Hank, here's the thing, though. The David Ortiz going in first ballot last year. Now, I know he was loved by the media, but when David Ortiz is linked to steroids, and he was in that 2003 report, and he gets in, that opened up a whole nother Pandora's box. And I know people don't love A-Rod, but you know what? You can't tell me that. I don't know. By the way, let's look at it. I see when I was much younger, I used to love listening to sports radio and them talking about, is somebody a Hall of Famer or not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on Baseball Reference as we talk here and look up Andrew Jones's numbers. And I remember Andrew Jones from when he was a 19-year-old kid in 96 in that World Series against the Yankees, and he hit two home runs in Game 1. I remember that quite well. I mean, I was a 6-year-old kid at the time, but I still remember that. 96 was the first World Series I remember. But let's look at Andrew Jones's career numbers here. So 1,933 hits, career 434 home runs, just under 1,300 RBI. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Wow, 10 Gold Gloves. Oh man, I mean, I think he'll get votes for sure. This is would be his 5th year on the ballot because he retired in 2012. You remember him, Hank, his last 2 years as a Yankee, right?
Yep.
Oh, man. Because, I mean, you look at all these other names. I mean, he's definitely, I would give, if I had a vote, I'd vote Beltran. I'd vote Helton. I would vote Andrew Jones. Jeff Kent, last year of candidacy on the ballot. And Rollins. Yeah. You know what? I think Jones has a chance. I just don't know if it's this year, though.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyways, let's what should we discuss next? Should we get into my Ranger rant, which I'm trying to do quickly because
yes, I will get. I'll tell you what, just real quick. The U.S. did win over Iran in the World Cup, so they are moving on to the next round. We'll get into more into that next week. But yes, I want to get into the hockey before we get out of here because, real quick, before we get to your Ranger rant, I have to talk about this story because this was unbelievable last week. So the Devils, who the Rangers did play on Monday night, and you were at the game, so we're going to get to that. But this was crazy. So they had a 13-game winning streak, and I didn't think the Devils were this good early on, but you can tell me about it in a second. But they had their streak snapped against the Toronto Maple Leafs at home last week, and this was after not one, not two, but 3 goals were disallowed, and fans were throwing items onto the ice. It was just crazy over there in New Jersey. But yeah, this is how the losing streak ended. But the winning streak ended, but they picked up right back. They picked right back up where they left off, and then they played our Rangers. And boy, these Rangers, these last couple of games, Hank, the big lead against Edmonton in the third period where they lost. They jumped out to a 2-0 lead on Monday night. You were at the Garden, and they blew that game. Hank, what's going on with the Rangers here early on?
I think what's going on is there's a lot of things. And for starters, a lot of people are in the camp of fire Gallant and fire Chris Drury. I lean more so towards the Gallant camp than Chris Drury because, look, here's the thing about the way the roster was constructed. Should he have been able to keep at least 1 or 2 of those reinforcements that we got at the deadline? I would say yes. I definitely think they could have used, say, a Frank Vetrano or what was his name? I think Tyler Mott, the fourth line center that we got from Vancouver, especially because he chose to re-sign Sammy Blais. I didn't agree with that during the offseason, only because Mott was one of the unsung heroes during that playoff run. And then, not to mention, you go out and you sign Vincent Trocheck to that big contract, which made sense because you needed a center. And the reason you did was because you also lost Andrew Kopp as a free agent to the Detroit Red Wings. And even though on paper it looked like they'd improved, like center depth wise, the problem was Trocheck does not quite have the chemistry with Panarin like a lot of us had hoped. And so they had to move Hedl up to get his minutes. But my issue with Gallant is simply this. I think he's been juggling his lines like crazy, and I don't know if it's been really helping the Rangers when it comes to them developing chemistry. And, it's also really screwing with the younger guys. I think Capo and Lafreniere are the guys that I was expecting to be getting more minutes this year, but that's not the case. And as a result, their production really hasn't quite been what it could be. And I also worry that, if this losing keeps going on and there's a chemistry problem, I think that very well could be a Gallant problem. And if we're still having this conversation and it's getting worse, say a month from now, then you might be hearing about talks about them firing Gallant, which I can't believe I'm saying because I've been a defender of Gerard Gallant all last year. I mean, he took the Rangers to the third round. Now, granted, there were some moves he made during the playoffs that I did not quite agree with. Benching Capo in Game 6, chief among them, but that's neither here nor there. I'm starting to think that maybe, besides the fact that he was able to do it in other places like Florida and Vegas, it seems to me like he's really having trouble with the development of some of the younger guys. And you're seeing a lot of the chemistry problems that were there at the end of the David Quinn era. And I'm getting a lot of similarities of this year with maybe the 92, 93 era, 93 season, and that the Rangers had the talent, but they're just not playing up to their potential. And again, I'm hoping that comment doesn't age well because we're only just at the end of November and things could very well change later on. But this is definitely something that is a concern. But with that being said, you also have to look at the players. Artemi Panarin, as talented as he is, his scoring and the point getting comes in bunches, and more often than not this year, you don't see him showing up. Big problem. Mika Zibanejad has been solid, but the real guy that's being paid a lot of money that I think has been much maligned would be Jacob Trouba. I mean, did you see how he just accepted that goal that Leon Draisaitl scored against him in that come back. Like, this is a guy that you're paying a lot of money. This is a guy that is your captain, and he's not, you don't see any fire in him. That's a problem. And now you worry that maybe they gave the captain to the wrong person. And look, even though I was fine with the fact that it was a player voting and it made sense to give it to Jacob Trouba, like, I think you could see why people like myself and Brian Attard of Blue Truth had their concerns for why he might not be the right choice. And it's not so much because of the contract, but it's also so much because of the fact that, like, there are certain moments where he'll, like, need to be, like, really angry to, like, play well. And, like, it took until last year for him to really, like, have a good year, or, like, really have a good year with the Rangers. But, like, this year, it's been a combination of stuff with him. I think injuries have been a really big problem. You can't tell me that guy has been playing healthy with the way he was delivering hit after hit last year. And, you know, at the end of it, when it all comes down to it, I think things can definitely turn around with the Rangers because, you know, at the end of the day, we're not that far out of the wild card spot. And technically speaking, they're still barely above 500, but that's only because of the point system. I think that changes definitely might be made sooner or later. But my issue is, where's the leadership? Where's the accountability? Like, this is a team that, you know, as great as they were, and I knew they'd be solid last year, they came out of nowhere, and teams have really been starting to adjust to the Rangers style. And like I said, and I can't stress it enough, the Rangers are not an untalented team.
Yeah.
I think teams have figured out a way to play them, and it's up to them to either adapt or die. And Johnny, I don't know about you, but the way I see it, the turning point from the Rangers was that game against the San Jose Sharks when they lost in overtime, because that was where David Quinn figured out the power play, because he coached that power play not too long beforehand. And because everybody saw how to attack that power play, it hasn't been the same. And the Rangers weren't quite as dominant as they were in the first week of the season when they destroyed the Lightning. Like, I know that was only 3-1, but they absolutely dominated that team. And then you had the Minnesota game where they were scoring goals left and right. It's really been frustrating, but I think eventually things can turn down. Oh, and I didn't even mention Igor Shesterkin. I'm sorry. I had to go there.
Hey, we were looking forward to this, so go for it.
Igor, in fairness, we have to remember that last year was a Hasek-like season that you probably were never going to get from him again. But with that having been said, you can talk about the goals allowed average being like in the twos. Like, he's given up some pretty bad goals. And I think it's exposing the fact that last year when the Rangers won a lot of those games, Igor definitely bailed him out, even with the amount of talent that they had.
Yeah.
And also, it's not like Halak's been much better, but just so many things with the Rangers have been wrong. And the tough part is, unlike last year, this year we don't know if we have the enforcements coming our way, because Chris Drury is going to be dealing with a good amount of cap stuff. Now, that's the reason why they traded Ryan Reeves, because, you know, Ryan Reeves is getting paid $6 million, and I think now there's questions raised. Do the Rangers trade for Patrick Kane, which theoretically could solve the problems, especially if you put him with Artemi Panarin. Although my only issue is, what are you going to be giving up for a Patrick Kane? You're going to be giving up a good amount of valuable draft capital, but at the same time, I could see why such a trade would be made, because this is one of your windows of opportunity.
Yeah, I'll tell you what's really been crazy is just following the whole the Metropolitan Division, Hank. I mean, you look at it right now, the Devils and the Islanders are the two hottest teams. Mm-hmm. Is that sustainable? Because, you know, we talk about the Rangers really like being, let's say, average to start the year. You know, Carolina's been, you know, pretty much average so far. They're 11-6-5. You know,
but you also haven't seen Carolina blow as many leads the way the Rangers.
Well, that's the thing. If you look at their games, I mean, that's the thing. You look at the Rangers, especially just these last two. You know, the 3-0 lead against Edmonton, the 2-0 lead to jump out to real quick against the Devils here, and they're not able to hold on. I'm with you though, and like I don't know how far I go with this before I say I'm ultimately concerned because we know hockey. Hockey's such a long year.
Mm-hmm.
The Rangers could play very well the last 20 games of the season, get into the playoffs, and take off. We've seen teams that just get hot at the right time down the stretch, get in, and take off into the playoffs.
2019 St. Louis Blues.
Yep, St. Louis Blues, perfect.
And by the way, let me expand on your Devils point for a minute. I had a feeling the Devils were going to be an improved team before the season. Like, I'm not going to tell you that, like, I thought they necessarily were playoffs, but I had a feeling that they were going to be pretty close. Here's the thing about them. Like, that streak came out of nowhere. Let's not forget, they lost their first 2 games, and so many people were calling for Lindy Ruff to be canned, but he's done a pretty solid job developing the young talent that they have. I mean, you've got Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt doing pretty well for them and all contributing to that winning streak. And it's crazy that they even lost that game, but still the fact that you have fans throwing stuff on the ice, like,
I mean,
be thankful you had a 13 game.
You saw me post that after it happened. It's like, they only had won 13 straight. Although I will say, I go back and look at those calls. I mean, they're kind of questionable. I mean, I don't know. I think 1 or 2 of those were legitimate disallowed goals, but 1 or 2 of them were also ones where like, yeah, I don't know. But I guess, you know what though, let's be fair. Any fan base after you have 3 goals disallowed like that, I think are going to get very, very, very angry. That's for sure. I mean, we all know, we remember that game against Minnesota. What was it, last year when the
I was there.
Yeah, I mean that. First of all, that was a bad. That was a terrible call. I mean, I'm gonna put it out there. So
I was there. You don't have to tell me.
Yeah, but yeah. So then, just to go back to your concern about the Rangers here, I don't know how long I would go before I'd say I'm ultimately concerned. I mean, I agree though. Like what you said, I don't know if you could have asked Igor to do like what he's been doing again.
But you still want him to be better. Like you don't need him. You don't need him to be Dominik Hasek in the late 90s.
Yeah. I will say this. I mean, not trying to compare to Henrik Lundqvist, but Henrik was consistent year in and year out. He would have a rough stretch here and there. But you know what the Rangers did have last year is they had a good backup. And you know what? Halak has not been that good so far.
That also brings up the question: do you call up Louis Domingue?
Wow! Imagine Louis Domingue on the Rangers side this time.
Him and those spicy sandwich, those spicy pork stuff.
Yeah.
Spicy
we remember him talking about him earlier on in Game On over the summer when the Rangers were playing the Penguins, and yeah, so yeah, Hank, it's been weird. I think the Rangers will find a way to turn this around, but like you said, if this continues to go on, let's say we get to Christmas and it's like this. I mean, what happens?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a very, very interesting thing to see, but we'll find out still early on in the hockey season. And I just don't know. I mean, I agree with you. I thought the Devils and the Islanders were going to be improved. I did not think they were going to be this good. But then again, at the same time, I said the Flyers were going to be improved. And, well, that's not worked out. So, but
I mean, you had false hope with them. But then again, you realize at this point, John Tortorella, as good of a coach as he is, he's kind of a relic in today's age.
Well, you also, though, need a talent, too, to get that job done. By the way, though, I still guarantee, though, the great thing about Tortorella the thing you can guarantee, though, with John Tortorella is you can always be guaranteed for a great post-game press conference and great in-game interviews if he's on national TV. One memo to ESPN and to TNT, to Turner, keep the Flyers on national TV, please. I want more in-game Tortorella interviews. You saw that one he did on ESPN. I think it was either on ESPN or ESPN Plus, where he kept it short and sweet, and that's what we love about John Tortorella. But, yeah, I think the Rangers are going to be all right. Definitely some things that you're concerned about. And, again, if this does continue, maybe it's a whole nother story, but we'll find out there. And, again, just like I said, folks, real before we got to this, the U.S. did beat Iran 1-0, so they will be in the round of 16 there in the World Cup, which is always a great thing to see. You know what? It's one thing. I'm not a big soccer guy, but Hank, I'll tell you, for like the World Cup, for the Premier League, I'll get into it. Of course, with Team USA, I'll definitely be into it, and we will definitely talk about them some more as well next week. And, of course, just a quick reminder, just a quick rundown, folks, of this week coming up. We got a lot of college football to talk about on the Monty Moment. That's going to drop on Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. We got all the coaching changes, the new coaches going to different places. We've got the latest in the college football playoff rankings. We got the conference championships happening this weekend. So we're going to dive into all of that. That's going to drop on Thursday. Of course, we got our NFL picks against the spread coming out on Friday. A lot of very good games happening this week. So we'll break that all down for you on Friday. And then, of course, we're right back here for episode 35 of Game On. As we start to wind down the year, we have about a month left in 2022, which is just absolutely crazy. Almost our first year of Game On in the books. And Hank's been along with me for the ride. And Hank, we'll see what happens here as we get into December, which is a critical month in sports as we get closer and closer to the end of the year. So, Hank, enjoy the rest of your week.
All right. Sounds good. Johnny, you do the same.
Absolutely, folks. I will see you back on Thursday for the picks. For the college football stuff. And, of course, back on Friday for our NFL picks. And, of course, follow us across social media. And, of course, our YouTube channel at Game On at ETB Network. So, for Hank and Dichter, I'm Johnny Montalbano. Enjoy your week, everybody. And we will talk to you again next week.